Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have an absolutely disturbing collection of driving/road trip scary stories. Trips that go horribly wrong for many, many reasons. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I don't know the name of the town, but it was in Nebraska. About an hour or two outside of Omaha, heading towards Colorado. My gas light came on, and I pulled off the interstate and main route. It was a small town a few miles off the beaten path. Real one-stop line grocery store and gas station kind of place, and it was getting later on in the evening, and there was some gathering on this gas station. I'm from a small town myself, and I get it. People will congregate anywhere if there's nowhere else to go. Immediately, a few people were looking at me quizzically, as I'm sure a very large man you've never seen before in your podunk town suddenly appearing with a car with main plates is fairly interesting. I just nodded politely and went inside. I went to the counter to pay for gas and cigarettes. This place had the old analog pumps, which painted a further picture, where the numbers slowly rolled on the dial. The station itself was pretty small, had minimal seating, and that was at a full. The place was honestly pretty dirty, and multiple people were just openly smoking inside. This was 2014, and was something I hadn't seen in quite a few years. The clerk was nice enough at first, until I spoke. I never thought I had that much of an accent, given a thick Mainer accent can be hard to decipher, even if you've lived there your whole life, like I had. But apparently I was instantly pegged. "Not from around here, huh?" with an odd look. "No, just passing through. I decided to move on a whim. I packed up my stuff and left a few days ago heading west." "Well, thanks." I was met with silence and a slow nod and a very odd look. Thanks. Have a good night." That's all I could say. I got no reply, and as I was leaving I noticed that the conversation from when I had come in had died out, and I could feel all eyes on me, and was starting to feel uncomfortable. I was standing there watching the dial on the pump move slow as molasses, and I noticed more and more people outside the station starting to look at me, gesturing their beer bottles and cigarettes towards my car. I heard something about my license plate from a couple of groups. Some guys had come out from inside and joined a couple of smaller groups, glancing and glancing, muttering amongst themselves. Anyone who's been through it knows the energy in the air when something bad is brewing. There was this weird hum building and the tension was almost palpable. I could nearly taste it. I was trying to calm myself down by saying there was no way that they'd do anything. I'd literally said nothing but hello, answered a question and said thank you. What could their problem even be but being from rural Maine? I'm no stranger to intoxicated, ignorant rednecks with a bone to pick, and they fit the bill. After what seemed like an eternity, my car was full. As I was getting the pump nozzle back on, I noticed two of them coming from around the backside parking lot towards me, and then a bunch more started. They didn't look happy, and one was snickering to himself and tapping his buddy's arm with a sneering scowl, looking straight at me. So obviously my instinct was, screw this. I hopped in the car and gave out a deep, hostile, "Hey," while they increased their walk to a near jog. They were pretty much to my car when I left with the quickness, hearing another one shout and a glass bottle shattering on the pavement behind me. One of the trucks came out of the back lot and was high-beaming me and speeding to try and catch me up, as I was very much hauling ass. I swear he was trying to get into a position a couple of times to pit me or something. The dude was obviously drunk, or just really wanted to mess with me, maybe both, driving all over the road and blaring the horn. I get on the on-ramp to the interstate and prepare for this to drag out all the way until the first state cop I could find. But then I looked back and saw this idiot rip the e-brake, whip the truck around, and lay smoking rubber as he guns it back in the direction of the gas station. About 20 minutes of deep breathing and 3 cigarettes later, I was finally able to unclench my ass. To this day I have no clue what I did other than exist and not be from this town, which I guess, in a lot of towns, is enough. One of the scariest moments of my life happened when my husband and I were driving on Highway 101 along the Oregon coast in my Mini Cooper. The ocean was on one side of us, the dark and endless steep cliff rose on the other side of the road. The highway curved and dipped through long stretches of forest and open coastline, with very little traffic around us that day. We were driving behind a large pickup truck that had a long ladder hanging over the tailgate. The ladder was not secured properly and extended several feet past the back of the truck and bounced slightly every time the truck hit a bump in the road. I remember watching it and thinking that it looked dangerously loose. Almost immediately, I was hit with an intense and overwhelming feeling of dread. It was not just the nervousness or normal caution, but a deep, gut-level certainty that something terrible was about to happen. I suddenly knew, without any logical explanation, that the ladder was going to come flying out of that truck and come straight through our windshield. My heart started racing, and my hands tightened on the armrest. I told my husband we needed to slow down and move over to the right. I told him the ladder was going to fall, and he brushed it off at first and said I was overthinking it. But I insisted, my voice shaking, telling him that something felt very wrong. We started arguing about it, with me begging him to either slow down or change lanes. I could not shake the feeling. Every second we stayed behind that truck, it felt like we were running out of time. My stomach twisted and my chest felt tight, like my body already knew it was coming. Finally, after a few tense moments, my husband yielded and moved the car over to the right. He slowed down just enough to create more distance between us and the truck. I kid you not. The moment we shifted positions, the pickup driver suddenly hit the gas and sped up. And that was when it happened. The ladder flew out the back of the truck, slammed onto the road and bounced violently across the pavement, scraping and spinning in the exact spot where our car would have been only seconds earlier. The sound was a loud metallic clang that echoed across the highway. We both stared in shock as the ladder skidded across the road behind the truck. If we'd have stayed where we were, it would have smashed directly into our windshield, and at highway speed, it most certainly would have killed us. My husband went completely silent. His face went pale as he realized how close he had come. He looked at me and shook his head, still processing what had happened, and neither of us spoke for a few moments after that. After that day, my husband started paying a lot more attention whenever I said I had a bad feeling about something. That moment on Highway 101 changed how seriously he took my instincts. I don't know how I knew that it was about to happen, but I am grateful that I listened to that feeling when it mattered most. I am a city boy, as in I have lived most of my life in a city and rarely ever visited the countryside. I am also not a sports guy nor the hiker/adventurer kind. This one time I was driving alone at night to a hill station. The drive was lonely as I didn't see any other cars in the past hour, when suddenly a truck from the opposite side rams into me and pushes my car off the road into a steep slope that eventually leads to a 400-foot drop. Applying the brakes wasn't helping, so I had to make a split-second decision and decided to jump out of the car. The car swerved and then eventually stopped after hitting a large rock at the very edge of the cliff. That was when the scariest half hour of my life began, when I realized that the driver of the truck didn't stop and chose to leave me for probably dead, and I was alone in a remote, foggy, forested area on a cliffside. I then became aware that I could hear animal sounds nearby, wild dogs, birds, and other animals, and pretty sure I even saw a snake. I checked myself. My track pants were torn, and I couldn't see any skin on my leg, which was a good sign. My shirt, however, was partially torn and filled with blood. My face was bleeding too. It was at that moment I realized no help was coming, and I appreciated just how isolated I was. So I mustered some courage and walked towards the road, and I must have done it for about 15 minutes until, to my luck, a police patrol picks me up and takes me to the hospital, where I stayed for 2 hours before being discharged. My friends came later to collect me, and I partied that night for being brave enough. It was honestly one of the most terrifying things to ever happen to me. We were driving from Mexico towards Texas, crossing the border in our camper, when everything went wrong just 8 kilometers shy of the US. The road was long, dry, and nearly empty, stretching endlessly through dusty terrain and low scrub brush. We had been on the road for hours, tired but relieved that we were almost back on US soil. Then the camper broke down. It sputtered once, lurched forward, and then rolled to a dead stop on the side of the road. The engine refused to turn over again, no matter how many times my husband tried. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere. Not long after, we were approached and informed that we were being assigned a handler. He made it very clear that we were in a cartel-controlled territory and that they did not want us there. We were told bluntly that we needed to leave as soon as possible, and the message was not subtle or friendly or negotiable. We called the US Embassy desperate for help. They told us the truth we were afraid to hear. We were in a cartel-controlled area that they could not enter. They stayed on the phone with us, keeping us calm, but said there was nothing they could do unless we were kidnapped or our lives were in immediate danger. So we sat there on the side of the road in the dark, with our broken camper and our dog curled between us. And we watched. Pickup trucks drove past with migrants tied up in the back, not sitting or standing tied. We were told they hadn't paid the coyote fee. The images burned into my memory. Their faces were terrified and exhausted. I remember thinking about their families, how desperate someone must be to take that kind of risk, and my heart ached for them. The night stretched on forever. Every passing vehicle made my stomach drop. I kept expecting someone to stop, someone to walk towards us, and I kept waiting for something worse to happen. The handler checked in on us, not kindly, just to make sure that we were still leaving. We barely slept. We sat in the camper listening to every sound. Our dog growled at shadows. The desert wind rattled the sides of the vehicle. Somewhere in the distance, engine roared through the dark. It was one of the longest nights of my life. By morning, we made a decision. We weren't staying another minute. My husband, our dog, and I grabbed what we could carry and crossed the border on foot, got a hotel room on the US side, and every step felt unreal. My legs were shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion, and I looked over my shoulder continually until I finally crossed. Once we were on the safe side, my husband went back and forth between hotels and the camper until it was finally fixed and drivable again. Each trip felt like a gamble, and each return like a miracle. There were more terrifying moments there than I could explain in words. In the middle of all that fear, though, we met an incredible couple who were genuinely worried about us. They brought us food, checked on us when they didn't have to, and their kindness was a lifeline in a situation that felt completely hopeless. And we've stayed in touch ever since. To this day, our families do not know this story. We never told them what really happened out there, and I think it's for the best. They'd only worry. A few years ago, my family and I were driving across the country to visit relatives. Instead of taking the interstate, we decided to use older state highways to save money and break up the trip with more stops for our toddler. It seemed like a good idea at the time. The slower roads usually led through small towns, hidden diners, and places you'd never see or appreciate if taking the highway. Late in the afternoon, after several hours of driving, we needed a place to stop and eat. We passed a weathered wooden sign advertising a lakeside campground. According to this sign, it had cabins, a playground, fishing docks, and a picnic area. Since we were traveling with 3 young children, it sounded perfect. The campground sat at the end of a winding gravel road, surrounded by dense woods. There were no other cars visible when we arrived, which seemed odd for a warm summer weekend, but we didn't think much of it. An elderly couple greeted us from the office. They were unusually friendly and told us we were welcome to use the picnic area free of charge. We thanked them and parked near the playground. For a while, everything felt normal. We unpacked lunch, fed the youngest child, and let the older kids play. A few other children appeared from somewhere among the cabins and joined them. The owners stood nearby, chatting with us, telling stories about the area and asking questions about where we were going. I wasn't paying too much attention to the children at first. Then I started overhearing parts of their conversation. My oldest told the local kids that we were just stopping for lunch before continuing on our trip. One of the children immediately shook his head and said, "No, you're not." My child laughed and replied that we had to leave because we were spending the night at a hotel. The other kid simply stared at him and said, "Everyone says that." That got my attention. My son asked what he meant. The child pointed towards the wood beyond the cabin. "The last family said that too," he replied. Another child joined in and added, "They all stay eventually." My kids stopped smiling. They repeated that we were leaving and had other plans. But one of the local children just looked at them and said, "No, you won't." The way he said it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. There was no teasing in his voice or hint that he was joking. It sounded less like a prediction and more like a fact. I called my children back to the table. As they hurried over, I noticed something strange. None of the local kids followed them. They simply stood there watching us. The elderly couple seemed to realize we'd heard something uncomfortable because they immediately changed the subject. They began talking about the campground's chapel and how visitors loved attending the evening services. And before long, they offered us a free cabin for the night. We thanked them but declined. They immediately pushed the offer again. When we declined the second time, the husband smiled, though something about his expression felt forced. He told us we'd already driven a long way, and that the roads became dangerous after dark. His wife nodded and added that it would be tragic if something happened to the children. The way she emphasized the word children made my stomach tighten. I started gathering our things. The couple followed us towards the vehicle, continuing to explain why staying was the safer choice. Their friendliness had changed. They weren't asking anymore. It felt like they were trying to convince us of something we hadn't agreed to. As we packed up, I noticed the children again. They had moved closer without me seeing them approach. None of them were speaking. They were standing in a loose line between the playground and trees watching us. One of them slowly raised a hand and waved. It wasn't a cheerful goodbye, almost mocking, I felt. As I loaded the last bag into the car, I heard a voice call out, "See you tonight." I turned and saw one of the children was smiling. I got inside, locked the doors, and we all pulled away as quickly as possible. In the rearview mirror, I could still see the owners standing near the road, the children watching from behind. 10 minutes later, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over and searched for the campground on my phone and nothing came up. When I checked my route history, I couldn't even find the road we'd supposedly turned into. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything, and the children were just overly enthusiastic or a bit weird. But all the same, this memory has never left me, and it has bothered me for longer than I remember. Once I was driving a large, flatbed work truck through a small, narrow tunnel, when an Osaka water semi-truck came barreling through, speeding, and well into my lane. I twitched the steering wheel and somehow avoided a wreck I know without a doubt would have killed myself and my work partner. Right afterwards, the first thought I had was, that was almost it. After exiting the tunnel, I pulled off the side of the road and sat there, hands frozen to the steering wheel. My partner and I just sat there silent, unmoving for 10 minutes. When we got out and inspected the truck, both mirrors had been ripped off, and there were deep scrapes alongside both sides of the truck. One side had tunnel-colored scrapes, and the other had Osaka-colored scrapes. If I had been an inch more to the left or right, that would have been it. I nearly died in a riptide on a trip I'd taken to visit my younger brother, and my last thought was, wow, caught in a riptide only 20 feet from shore, what a dumb way to die. I hope my brother makes it. Thankfully, there were lifeguards who pulled us out in time. I told them, you must think we're stupid, and they said, no, it happens all the time, several times a day. The most recent brush with death was the most peaceful, and because of that it was the scariest. I was home alone, my spouse was out of town. I had some kind of episode, a stroke, TIA or something, I'm still not sure what. All I know is 1 minute I'm eating dinner and watching Netflix, and then just blackness. Next thing I know, I'm laying on my back, eyes closed and feeling so warm and content and at peace, and unable and unwilling to move. After a long time, I was able to crack my eyes open and realized I was laying on the floor in a pool of my own blood and vomit because I'd cracked my head when I fell. But for some reason, this realization didn't worry me at all. It just felt warm, and I was at peace, and allowed myself to drift back into oblivion. I thought for sure that was it for me, but at the time I was strangely content with it. Waking up the next day was both a surprise and terrifying, knowing I'd been completely fine with dying. Before I get into this, I want to be clear about something. I am not someone who believes in anything supernatural. I've always been skeptical, and if someone else told me this exact story, I'd probably question it or try to explain it away. Even now, years later, I still don't know what to make of it. It might have been some kind of hallucination or misinterpretation, but whatever it was, it felt completely real at the time, and it stuck with me. So, I was only 18 when this happened, on a high school trip to Spain. We had spent the entire day in Barcelona doing sightseeing, and by the evening we were on a bus heading back to our hotel in Lloret de Mar. It had been a long day, and I was tired and not really in the mood to socialize. Our class had been mixed with another group, and most of my friends were sitting on the lower level of the bus. I ended up upstairs, stuck next to a guy called Daniel who I did not know well. He was loud, constantly fidgeting, and would yell across the aisle to his own friends, and noticeably smelled of BO, which didn't help the situation. So I put my headphones in and tried to tune everything out. I was listening to music and just watching the scenery through the window. We were driving through what looked like a semi-industrial area on the outskirts of town, with lots of plain buildings, warehouses, and mostly empty streets. There honestly wasn't that much to look at. At some point, Daniel shifted in his seat and accidentally elbowed me. I turned towards him and told him to calm down a bit. While I was turned away from the window, I noticed something move in my peripheral vision. At the same time, I felt this sudden, intense drop in temperature, like a wave of cold moving through me, along with a strong sense of unease. It was enough that I hesitated before turning back towards the window. I remember looking straight ahead for a moment, not wanting to check what I thought I had seen, because part of me expected something to be there. When I finally did look, there was nothing out of the ordinary. It was just the same buildings and empty streets. That helped a little, and I told myself I had just been imagining it and reacting to shadows or movement. A short time later, the bus stopped at a red light. While we were sitting there, I noticed the same movement again at the edge of my vision. This time, I turned to look more quickly, expecting it to be nothing again. But instead I saw something. It was not a quick glimpse. I was able to look at it clearly for several seconds. The best way I can describe it is that it looked like a shape made from darkness, but darker than the surrounding, like it had its own depth to it. It moved in a way that reminded me of flames or smoke, but more controlled, like it had a more defined form. It was on the side of the building, moving along the wall on all fours. Its body was low and stretched out, and its back legs bent in a way that did not look natural. I could make out a head shape, and what stood out the most was that it seemed to have a kind of horned or pointed outline. At one point, it turned its head in my direction, and I had the distinct feeling that it was looking directly at me. I don't know how long I actually watched for. It felt longer than it probably was, maybe 20 or 30 seconds. The bus started moving again, and as it did, the thing climbed up towards the roof of the building and went out of view. After that, I forced myself to look away, and I just stared straight ahead. My whole body was shaking and I felt extremely cold. My heart was racing to the point where I thought something might actually be wrong. The feeling wasn't just fear. It was more like a deep, overwhelming sense that something wasn't right, like I had seen something I shouldn't have. What made it worse was how normal everything else was. The other people on the bus were still talking, laughing, and yelling as if nothing else had happened. No one else had reacted at all. Daniel looked over to me at one point and asked if I was all right, and whether he should call a teacher. I told him I was fine, that I just needed a minute, but that I couldn't really explain what happened. I didn't sleep that night. I actually had a constant headache for the rest of the trip, and felt on edge the entire time. I just wanted to go home. Since then, I've made a habit of not reacting to things in my peripheral vision unless I absolutely have to. I know that sounds irrational, but that moment stuck with me. I've tried to come up with a logical explanation for it. Maybe it was a trick of the light or my brain misinterpreting shadows while I was tired and overstimulated. That would make the most sense. But at the time, the clarity of what I saw and the way it moved doesn't match anything I've been able to explain away. I don't expect people to believe this, and I understand why they wouldn't. I probably wouldn't either. But whatever it was, felt real to me. And it's something I honestly still think about often. My grandmother only told this story a handful of times, when she wanted to scare the living bejesus out of me. Back in the late 1970s, when she was around 30, she flew to a sprawling East Coast city for a business meeting. I think it was New York. She left her 5 kids behind for the trip, and the youngest was still in diapers. This was a rare moment in her life when she wasn't doing housework, and the trip was supposed to be about work, but also maybe, just maybe, reclaiming a bit of her own personal identity. She stayed at a modest hotel on the edge of downtown, and that morning she had a meeting across town. She had the front desk call a taxi while she stood outside under the awning, adjusting the strap of her leather bag. and that is when a cab pulled up. It looked like every other cab. At first, she didn't see the driver's face at first, but he leaned over and popped the passenger door open, and that was enough. She assumed it was the taxi the hotel had called and she stepped in. The moment she got in, the smell hit her like a freight train to the face. It reeked of damp and mildew and body odor, congealed in a foul stench. There was a plastic Jesus stuck to the dashboard, and although she was repulsed, she had a meeting to get to, and she gave the man the address. He didn't reply, just nodded slightly, and they pulled out into traffic. At first, she didn't think much on his silence. She tried making small talk, asking how the traffic was, whether he'd been a driver long, but he chose to ignore her completely. He kept both hands on the wheel and just stared ahead through the cracked windshield. It must have been about 10 minutes until she realized something was wrong. They were not going in the right direction. The city's towers were vanishing behind them, and the streets began thinning. Sidewalks gave way to chain-link fences and gas stations, and soon they were on an unfamiliar road lined with shuttered motels. "Hey, I think you missed a turn." "Excuse me, where are we going?" He didn't so much glance in the mirror. She reached for the door handle, trying not to show panic, and it wasn't locked. And that's when she knew. She started watching the road sign, seeing signs for a no-name highway and an old motel up ahead. The place looked like something from a nightmare. She thought about the 5 kids she had waiting at home. She thought about how long it would take for someone to notice she was missing, and she looked at his hands, which were big and still clutching the steering wheel, and she looked in the road again. And she made a choice. In one smooth motion, she curled her legs beneath her like a spring, flung the door open and jumped. The asphalt tore through her stockings and shredded the heels of her shoes, and she rolled once, twice, until her shoulder hit a patch of gravel, and her head rang with the sound of rubber skidding as the cab screeched to a stop. But she didn't wait to see if he got out. She ran into the dark brush off the road. The twigs sliced at her palms and branches. As she scrambled into the trees, panting so hard she tasted copper in her mouth, and she crouched behind a rotting log and waited. She could see the cab driver looking around everywhere. Eventually he turned slowly, scanning the trees, and saw him raise something to his face. A cigarette. He exhaled a long plume of smoke and got back in the car. But he didn't leave. He just sat there idling. She stayed frozen in that bush until the car finally turned around and rolled off. It took her nearly an hour to walk to the nearest hotel, her knees bleeding, blouse ripped, and when she reached the lobby, the receptionist looked at her like she was a vagrant. "I need your phone." "I'm sorry, ma'am, we can't," and she slammed her hands on the counter. "Get me the phone." He handed it to her. She called the colleague she was supposed to meet, gave them the address, and told them to bring the police and hurry. By the time they arrived, she composed herself, but her eyes were still wild, and she told the cops everything. The police conducted a raid on the hotel she was staying at that night. They found padlocks on the inside of doors, soundproofed rooms, rope, mattresses on the floor, and 2 women who had been reported missing, drugged and battered and barely conscious. There were traces of others too. There weren't enough to charge the cabbie with murder, but enough to know that this wasn't a one-time operation. But the cab driver was never caught, as there was no record of him. The next day, her colleagues asked her if she wanted to end the trip early and head back home. She said no and stayed. One of my friends reminded me of this story, so I figured I'd share it with all of you. This happened towards the beginning of our freshman year of college. My best friend, another freshman girl my age, and I befriended this other freshman guy, and we quickly became a tight-knit group. We would hang out with each other constantly, to the point some assumed we were either siblings or roommates. At the beginning of our first semester, none of us were really into the whole party scene. So we spent most of our time wandering around campus in the late hours of the night, and I'm talking 4 to 5 a.m. some nights. We had lots of fun adventures and made all sorts of fun memories doing this, but we had our fair share of weird encounters too, both with other people, and some we cannot explain to this day. This story happened not on the weekend, but I believe on a weekday close to midterms. I remember us all studying in one of the academic buildings together late at night, and then one of us mentioned wanting to take a long walk around campus to help relieve stress. It was around 2 or 3 a.m., and we decided to hike out to one of the scenic overlooks on campus. Our campus was pretty rural and surrounded by woods, so there was a path through the woods that you could take, or could just walk on the main road. We decided to follow the road. It was really dark, and this particular area of campus had very few streetlights. We were using our phone flashlights to see where we were going. It was probably not the best idea to be roaming around campus so late at night, but we were stupid freshmen and he had done it plenty of times before. Not to mention our campus felt safer due to it being so rural. So we made it to the overlook, and were the only ones there due to how late it was. There were no cars parked or anything. The way it's set up is the road goes into this circle around the overlook. We were sitting on a bench with our backs to the main road, talking about random things, when all of a sudden we felt headlights at our backs, and we all turned to see who it was. It wasn't entirely unusual for a car to be out that late at night. Our campus police do regular patrols of the area, or students will go there to hook up or do drugs. The car was an older GMC Yukon-style SUV, and it was a dark forest green color. I vividly remember the color because you typically don't see many cars that color. We all watched the car come in from the road, drove around the little circle, and then went back up the road. We resumed our conversation, and maybe 2 to 3 minutes later we could see headlights behind us again. We again turned to look, and realized it was the same green car as before coming back a second time. We didn't think much of it, but I could tell my friends were slightly weirded out by it. Again the car approached from the road behind us, and went around the loop, but was driving much slower this time. They kinda stopped midway through the circle for a few seconds, before slowly driving away again. It isn't that unusual for cars to go slow around the circle portion, especially if they're tourists or someone wanting to enjoy the view of the lookout. So we again didn't think much of it, and figured they came back a second time just to enjoy the sights again, although it probably wasn't much of a sight given how dark it was. We tried to carry on with our conversation, but I think all of us felt a little uneasy. I almost wasn't surprised when about another 2 to 3 minutes later, we saw headlights approaching from behind us again. We all turned around, hoping it wouldn't be the same car, but of course it was. We were all pretty scared, but I think we were all trying to laugh it off. We were like, they must love it here. This time, they once again slowed down, going around the circle, and rolled down their windows to yell at us. We were sitting far enough back from the circle, and it was a windy night, so we couldn't really make out what they were yelling, but we all agreed we heard, "Gonna get you," towards the end. We also couldn't see well enough to recognize faces, but could see enough to know it was a car full of younger men. We're all pretty uneasy and confused at this point, and after they drive off, we frantically are trying to figure out how to handle the situation. We at first were trying to brush it off and calm each other down by saying it was probably some of our mutual friends trying to scare us, but none of us recognized the car or the voices enough to say that was for sure the case. We all considered walking back since it was late anyway, but we were all so scared we would just run into this car again on the main road. My best friend and I tried to laugh it off, agreeing there was simply no way it would drive by a fourth time, and that we were probably making a big deal out of nothing. My male friend who was with us kept telling us he just didn't have a good feeling about it, and said that if the car came by again, he would try to take pictures of their license plate and then call the campus police. We eventually agreed with him, figuring the car likely wouldn't come by again. Another 5 minutes, and no sign of the car. We all relaxed and continued carrying on, but of course we were wrong. We all sat in silence as the headlights approached for the 4th time. Neither of us really wanted to say anything or look behind us to confirm it was the same dark green car. As the car rounds the circle, our male friend stands up with his phone in hand in an attempt to take a picture of the license plate. This time, instead of completing the circle and going back up the road, the car suddenly pulls into a parking spot off the side. My friends and I are all panicking, assuming the worst is about to happen. We are all waiting for someone to step out of the car, or for the car to leave, when our male friend suddenly gets up and is like, "This is ridiculous, I'm going to go talk to them." My other friend and I are begging him not to, since we don't know who these people are or what they're capable of. But he brushes it off and starts walking towards them. At this point, I think he was still assuming they were likely friends or fellow students trying to scare us and not some randos. My friend and I are freaking out as we watch him approach the car, and whoever is driving rolls down their window and sticks their head out. It was definitely not someone we knew. It was a guy, a few years older than us, who looked rough. Absolutely not the person you would want to run into at 3 a.m. in the woods. My friend and I watched this guy and our friends start talking, and to us, it looked like the guy was really angry. We were debating whether or not we should go ahead and call the police, but as soon as my friend managed to dig her phone from her bag, our friend was walking back, and the green car was leaving. We all look at him and ask what happened, and he explains the car was filled with creepy-ass guys a little older than us. The driver had explained that they were from out of town, a city about an hour away, and had gotten bored, so decided to drive around campus to mess with students when they came across us. One of the passengers had seen my friend get up to take what he correctly assumed was a photo of their license plate, and they freaked out and decided to pull over and tell us they meant no harm since they didn't want to get in trouble. They apologized to my friend for scaring us and explained they would leave. My friend was so afraid while talking to them that all he could say was, maybe don't do that again because we nearly called the cops. We all calmed down significantly after they left, and eventually felt safe enough to leave. We all laugh about this situation now, since ultimately nothing bad happened, but it still gives me the creeps. What would have happened if my friend hadn't have tried to take a picture of their license plate? Were they planning something else that we prevented? Why was this group of random men who lived over an hour away randomly driving around a rural college campus on a random weeknight? It hit me a few days before all of this happened, but I realized that I had seen that car before, earlier that day. I had spotted the exact same car a few times around campus. It drove past me as I was walking to my morning class, again when I was coming out of the library later in the afternoon, and again at dining hall in the early evening. I made note of it the first time I saw it, since it was such a uniquely colored car, and it also happens to be one of my favorite. As I kept seeing it, I remember thinking, I have a stalker. I didn't take it seriously since it was a smaller campus that had a lot of traffic that time of year, so I figured it was just a tourist or a coincidence that I kept seeing the car. But now I really wonder, were they following me the whole day? Had the car been around before and I just never noticed? What do you think? I'm quite sure, though, that all the same, their intentions were never good. Strange things happen in this world, and in some places they happen far more often. There is a place I know where strange activity feels more concentrated than anywhere else. It's a stretch of road between two cities that I travel regularly. When you cycle there, you pass a sign that says you are leaving the city. From that point, it takes about 15 minutes of cycling before reaching the next sign. Around that sign, there are trees forming what look like a small forest. Then you pass several sports fields, and further ahead near the overpass there's a swimming pool. Near that overpass there are several areas on both sides of the path where you cannot quite see what's hidden. You only catch small glimpses in the darkness beyond the path. During the day, the path is busy with people walking towards the pool or the sports fields. But when night falls, the place changes completely. I know this because I work in hospitality and often ride home very late. It becomes pitch dark in that stretch of road. Without a light, you can barely see a few meters ahead of you. The trees block most of the moonlight and swallow the path in shadow. And during those hours, strange things begin to happen. The first thing I noticed was that my mother never wanted me to cycle there. She always said it was dangerous and warned me of kidnappers. I understand her fear better now. You might ask why I still take that path. The truth is that it sparks my curiosity in ways I cannot explain. I know it's dangerous, and I know I probably shouldn't go there. But what happens in that place fascinates me. So far I've never been attacked, but I wish I could document what I have seen. I wish I could draw it, or film it. I never dare get closer, because I am afraid of what they might do to me. I stay on my bike and keep moving every time. So far, I have encountered 5 different types of figures. The first is the tall man with the hat. As the name suggests, he is very tall and wears a hat. He appears most often after midnight. He is always dressed completely in black. He is almost as tall as a tree. His hat hides his eyes, but his skin is pale like moonlight. He only stands there and stares at you. He never moves. About 3 minutes after seeing him, a wave of fear washes over your body. You start pedaling faster and whisper prayers to God. I'm not religious, but fear makes you desperate. That fear only fades once you reach the next town. The second thing I see is what I call the yellow eyes. They appear when it's just getting dark. 2 yellow orbs glow from the bushes beside the path. Every time you look directly at them, they disappear. I do not know what hides behind them, and maybe it's best I never find out. The third is the screaming woman. I believe she is a woman. Although I have never seen her, I only heard her once, and I never want to hear her again. Her scream cuts straight through my headphones and overpowers my music. A sudden gust of wind follows her scream. I pedaled as fast as I possibly could. I didn't know if she followed me. The fourth phenomenon is what I call the radio. It is strange but almost comforting in a disturbing way. Sometimes my headphones die because I forget to charge them. In the darkness, I hear a soft radio voice. It does not come from my earphones. It sounds like it's floating in the air around me. It does not sound modern, but like an old radio from the 1970s. The voice is warm, slightly distorted, and strangely calming. I always hope it's my late grandfather. That is what it sounds like somehow. The fifth thing I see are the shadows. They speak for themselves. They appear around 1 in the morning and you see them standing in front of you, slipping through your peripheral vision. If you stare at them, they stay where they are. The moment you look away, they vanish. I do not know what they are or why they are there, but I am determined to find out someday. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this before? I'd be really interested to hear it. Back when our salaries were actually enough for our bills, and honestly before kids, my wife and I did the let's go for a drive thing. We ended up driving for about 5 hours with a break for lunch through what I'll call almost South Central Wisconsin. As we're driving around, we saw multiple signs for the same town, almost as if we were just driving into town. Then about an hour later, driving into town again. The towns were Lebanon and New Lebanon. There's a bunch of weird history with the town, not necessarily paranormal, just stories behind why there's one town with essentially 4 names. It was unsettling enough that I tried to recreate our trip on a map, and couldn't figure out how we could have possibly gone through the same town multiple times, also including the fact that none of them were the same town. My grandparents made me tour Ave Maria College in Florida when I was a teen, and we drove for what felt like 3 hours through orange groves and wilderness to get there. The whole journey felt endless, winding through thick Florida brush and endless stretches of orange trees that blurred into one another. There were 2 towns that creeped me out along the way, and neither of them made any sense. The first was this weird little nowhere town where we stopped to get gas. There were all of these huge handmade Jesus signs everywhere. Like everyone in this town was so crazy about Jesus that they had to put up rambling handmade signs about him, cobbled together from junk. Wooden crosses, painted boards, anything they could find, all covered in images about Jesus. The gas station was also a laundromat, which was also strange, and the 2 people in there looked like they hated us, like they recognized we didn't belong and wanted us out. They didn't say anything, and just stared at us with that cold, judging look that made my skin crawl. It freaked me out. We're from Minnesota, so the overtly Jesus-y stuff is not normal, culturally. Like, I don't know if it's that normal in Florida, but up here someone who covers their property in Jesus signs is going to be considered insane and unpredictable and possibly scary. I see more Jesus stuff in the South, but the degree to which there was Jesus stuff in that one little weird town alarmed and disturbed us. The other town that creeped me out was Ave Maria itself. The college was, at the time, a religious college that marketed to Catholics, but wasn't recognized by Catholicism. Everything about this town was super weird, like it was designed by amusement park set designers. The streets were too clean, the buildings too perfect, and the colors too bright. It felt artificial, like someone had built a fake version of a town and stuffed it in the middle of Florida wilderness. There were multiple smoothie and froyo places, and later when The Good Place came out, I was like, oh my god, it's Ave Maria. And I feel like the idea of a bunch of demons trying to build a fake little artificial heaven in the pit of hell is a really good way to encapsulate the whole vibe of the place. The town was created by the CEO of Domino's Pizza, and we had to watch this weird propaganda video when we got there about his life and dream to create a perfect Catholic town. The college and the town were supposedly completely dry with no drugs or alcohol. They kept saying stuff like, "This town has everything, so students never have to leave." The whole time I was there, I was imagining trying to escape Ave Maria and having to navigate the endless Florida wilderness to reach civilization. 3 hours of driving through orange groves and nothing else, that's what it felt like. They had this big building in the middle, I think it was a church, in the shape of the Pope's hat. I don't know why my grandma thought I'd want to attend this school. The main selling points were, we're far away from any normal place. You're completely insulated and isolated in a Catholic community. We love the Domino's Pizza CEO. You'll never have to leave, and you'll never want to. I was there for 3 hours and I desperately wanted to escape. My family aren't even Catholic, so I don't even know what my grandparents were thinking. And at the time they weren't even endorsed by the Catholic Church. And I think maybe they weren't even accredited. But still, that trip sticks with me. 3 hours through the wilderness, 2 weird towns, and a place that felt like it was built to trap you instead of welcome you. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever go back. And wouldn't recommend anyone else go either. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you have enjoyed tonight's collection of driving and road trip scary stories. While I was recording this, I had an idea for a video, maybe small rural towns. I don't know, maybe one of you in the comments can help me navigate that, but I think it sounds like a really interesting topic, because it definitely sounds like small insular places definitely have their fair share of creepy. Would this be something you'd like to see in future? Let me know and maybe we can make it happen. I would like to give one final thank you to my members and patrons whose names you can see on screen for their continued support. And if you are one of these amazing folk, I have some movie theatre stories for you dropping tomorrow at the usual time. And if you'd like to find out more info on joining that, it's down below. But that's it from me, guys. Stay awesome, and I'll see you on Thursday as we journey to the attic. Good night.